This guy. He doesn't really fit in a concise box, and I think that's among the reasons he's actually quite beloved. Wario does things on his own terms. Sometimes that means being an all-out Mario villain, as originally intended, and sometimes that means being a doubles partner with his bizarro other half. But all the time, Wario's rude, loud, brazen, and just absurd in so many ways. This absurdity was taken to its extreme in the WarioWare series. These games are essentially collections of microgames, created by Nintendo's top R&D team, thrown at the player disorientingly fast and in as silly a manner as possible. There are different levels represented by the other equally ridiculous characters, and each of those levels has its own contained storyline and presentation elements. Yep, the company has even stated how dumb it is on record, yet somehow it works. Despite the fact that this series clearly predicted our attention spans shrinking to mobile game levels, I have yet to find a single other modern game which comes close to recreating this addictiveness and the utter directed chaos of WarioWare. And what inspires me about this series' unexpected success is that it's kind of more than the sum of some technical parts. This first entry, WarioWare Inc., genuinely just seems to reflect the creative spirit of each individual member of the team, and they've curated these nonsensical ideas effectively. So here you are in a taxi. It's late at night, rain pouring down your windshield. The city is too obscured in these conditions to see more than fleeting shapes and silhouettes out the window. In the back seat is a mythical creature who urgently needs to return to the sea, and it's your mission to help them. How did Nintendo choose to score this moment? Yep, the bubbly 4-part pop tune. Those of you who played this game when it originally came out for Game Boy Advance may still have this song stuck in your head after 20 years. It's called Drifting Away, and the lyrics loosely talk about drifting towards the ocean, clearly at least a nod to the events unfolding on Dribble's highway. The tune even features 4 different reharmonizations of its main melody, which are played on the different radio stations accessible by Dribble. In WarioWare Inc., when our taxi driver friend switches between stations, they all are playing this tune, just in different styles and harmonic presentations. This first part is what I consider to be the main version of the tune. You could maybe just call this the pop variant, but I'll be referring to it as funk pop, due to all the syncopation in the groove and the bass line. This is a very standard chord progression, but the bass line especially showcases Ryoji Yoshitomi's arsenal of variation techniques. This line is varied just enough throughout the entire section to add excitement without overdoing it and sounding too aggressive. This is sort of how a pop bassist would approach an arrangement if they were told to be a little more active. Also, I have to note that it seemed cool to me how this arrangement is sort of presented in the game as a call and response with how they mixed it. Inside the taxi, they present the mix as sort of a high pass coming from the radio vibe. But then when you enter the microgames, those second halves of the phrases feel like an instrumental response, and the mix actually becomes fuller. As aforementioned, when Dribble changes the station, we're treated to our first reharm. If I were speaking to a live band on a gig after an audience member had just requested this part of the song, I could just look over and tell the band that it's a Latin jazz tune in A minor. And that's all well and good for a live setting. The band would know enough, honestly, to get pretty close to playing the tune, even if they haven't heard it before. But since we're in this more analytical context, I want to point out that although the term Latin is useful for quickly conveying some stylistic notes as a performer, it's often oversimplified and used as a catch-all phrase by people who want to sell you albums and streams. There are hundreds, probably thousands of separate styles of music which originate from Central and South America, and have donated elements to the globalized music scene. You may have heard of stuff like samba, cha-cha, mambo. I would like to start referring more specifically to the cultures these tunes originate from, as opposed to just this catch-all term. As far as WarioWare Inc. is concerned, we can just refer to this as the Montuno section, maybe. The term Montuno refers to this sort of arpeggiated part a pianist might come up with in an Afro-Cuban tune. Playing and composing these patterns is an absolute blast as a performer, and they also happen to be just very well recognized, even by non-performers. Harmonically, our composer chooses to frame this melody in a minor key, specifically the relative minor key. This scale, otherwise known as the relative minor, has exactly the same notes as our original key, but simply starts on the 6th of the chord, providing us with a minor version. Making use of relative keys is quite common, and a very effective way to reframe a melody in a way which isn't too far from the original motif. Okay, so the major difference with this third part seems to more be the main groove, rather than anything with the harmony or the voicings. I'm gonna label it as reggae-ish. Admittedly, it doesn't sound enough like reggae to me that I would feel comfortable removing the ish. However, I have actually found another version of this that Nintendo produced years later, and in that version they definitely play up the reggae elements even more. And on this fourth part, we complete the pattern by returning to the relative minor. However, I find this version to also be less clear in terms of its genre. It does seem like a nod to Baroque music with its very orderly scalar counterlines, but to me it doesn't seem to be purely that. There are some more modern percussive elements tossed in, which kind of make it feel like a tango, or maybe some sort of dance style, which may be influenced by classical concepts. Anyway, you've probably noticed how messy this table of contents has become, and it actually begs a solid question worth addressing. How useful is it to even force ourselves through this exercise of assigning these sorts of labels? As I mentioned before, genres as a concept can be extremely useful to people who sell you music. Because you already have a decades-long connection to the terms pop, rock, and Latin, it is just going to be way quicker and easier to cut through and catch your attention with tried and true labels like these. And of course, it's not purely cynical. Genre names literally help you track down other musicians that you might enjoy. And performing musicians do need to teach tunes to each other on stage in 5 seconds a lot more than you probably realize. However, a trap I often see musicians, including and especially myself, fall into is an over-reliance on these genre titles. There are so many separate elements and details which go into the composition of these songs which can't simply be explained in a word. If you truly want to know why the B section on Drifting Away makes you want to dance, I'm pretty sure it's more useful to discover that there's an Afro-Cuban style montuno and a weird triplet counterline, rather than being told that it's just Latin and it's in the key of A minor. But anyway, these are just some of my thoughts on the matter. I would be very curious to hear in the comments below how you feel about the use of terms like these, and if it's something we should think more critically about or not worry too much about. And now, I would like to thank our Patreon patrons for their support of the channel. Now that I've released/uploaded this video, I plan on uploading a song and a transcription to the Patreon as exclusive content. If you're not yet a patron and you'd like to check some of that out, as well as participate in polls related to future video topics, feel free to check out the link below.